Welcome to the Mick, a Mook, and a Mike.
Hosted by four-time Emmy-nominated producer
Frank Pace. And retired New York City firefighter, 9/11 first responder, and Vietnam vet, Billy O'Connor.
Today's guest, actor, director, Boy Meets World, Girl Meets World, co-host of the podcast, Pod Meets World, Ryder Strong.
My brother Frankie, how are you today, pal? Who we got today?
Well, we got Ryder Strong, star of Girl Meets World.
The director, actor, podcaster. He's selling out shows with Pod Meets World. He'll be a good guest. He's a fascinating guy.
Well, he's Irish, right? So, of course he's fascinating, Frank. I mean, he's an Irish guy. I understand he wrote a play called Irish Twins.
Irish Twins.
You know what that's about? You know what Irish Twins are? You guys know what that's about?
Let me guess, two Irishmen. Or two Irish women.
No, you know what it is like Irish birth control, like one after the other. Families of 9, 10, 11.
Oh, no.
So if you have a brother that was born within a year of another, that's Irish Twins.
Oh.
Because it's one after the other. So I'm interested in asking him about that.
And he's the son of a firefighter.
Son of a firefighter. The mother was a teacher.
His mother?
His mother was a teacher.
Hello, mother.
And his mother ain't a father. The father ain't a mother. Was he a mother? Yeah, and he had his father. Yeah, so, I'd be interested to find out why he picked Irish Twins. I guess his brother is Irish. I mean, obviously Irish as well. Probably within a year.
Maybe within a year.
I guess. That would be the assumption.
That would be.
So
what's new?
I don't know. I was thinking about getting the case of Bud Light since I read all the controversy.
You heard
about the Bud Light thing, the transsexual thing? It was some TikTok put out an ad. Is it TikTok or Tactic or Tic-Tac?
TikTok.
TikTok.
TikTok. Well, who was shooting it?
I don't know, but it's apparently this Bud Light.
Who's
did a TikTok ad?
Who's the white rapper? The guy from Detroit.
Eminem?
Was Eminem shooting?
I don't know anything about it.
Oh, you didn't hear anything about it?
No, I know
about
Bud Light. I don't know the
yeah.
details.
And I always thought Bud Light was a good product because nobody likes a fat drunk, Frank. Drink Bud Light.
I guess Bud Light used a transsexual in their
Yes,
ad.
and that's what happened. And the boycotts and the noise and the grief.
Kid Rock.
Kid Rock.
Oh, Kid Rock.
Kid Rock.
No.
He was shooting machine guns.
He shot a machine gun. He was shooting cans of Bud Light.
Okay, yeah.
Speaking of Bud Light.
Speaking of Bud Light.
That's a great segue to our guest.
Some segments come up with
Some segments. I heard that
I spilled more Bud Light than you guys have drank.
Oh, no. I don't think that you spilled more of anything that Billy O'Connor has drank.
And you know what? You were talking about the Irish there, and then you were talking about drinking. And you know why God invented alcohol, right?
Oh, yeah.
So the Irish couldn't.
I don't want to kill the joke, but yeah.
Say it again, Joe.
Yeah, he invented alcohol so the Irish couldn't take over the world.
That's right. So the Irish wouldn't talk in the world. We were hanging on to the edge of it.
Joe West is with us again today. How are you doing, my friend? I'm surprised you haven't been on the golf course today.
I was on the golf course this morning. I shot 80. Yeah, a little bit lower than I normally do, but I'm happy. I
got to go back to what you said just a second ago, because when Frank interjected, it's like you're talking about the Irish not being able to conquer the world because that's why God invented alcohol. It's my mother, Lord have mercy on my mother. This is a true story. I once told her, a good friend of hers, so many people have died of alcohol, of liver poisoning in my family, of alcoholism, that I once told her, out of the blue, a good friend of hers had died. I said, Ma, you know who died? Michael Fitzmaurice. And she said to me, Fitzmaurice? Dead? Is he? But he didn't drink at all. She couldn't figure. There was another way. I said, people die other ways. They fall off roofs. They heart attacks, But it was just logical that they could be dead because he didn't drink.
He didn't drink at all. Your father drank a little bit.
Oh, my father drank quite a bit. A little bit. Yeah, but that's part of, there's a lot of stereotypes, You want your laundry done right, you want your pizza or whatever. Italian food, but the Irish do like to drink. I mean, that's a stereotype that's true.
What did you say in our book, If These Lips Could Talk, which also features a segment on Joe West, available on Amazon?
That was very good. That was very good. Got to get that plug in there.
Yeah. What did you say? You said
alcohol doesn't run in the family. In my family, it gallops.
Yep.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And my mother told me that, Billy. You know, but you got to be careful. You know, alcohol doesn't run in the family. It gallops.
Well, Rita is a big Bud Light fan. Your wife Rita is a big Bud Light fan, I believe.
No, she drinks the Michelob Ultra. She drinks the Michelob Ultra. I was the one that drank the Bud Light, you know. And I think this country singer John Rich has a bar in Nashville, and he said when this thing came out with the advertisement for this new Bud Light, that he didn't sell a single beer, draft or can or bottle, for the next 4 days.
Wow.
Not one beer.
Really?
A beer or Bud Light specifically?
Bud Light.
Boycotted. Wow, that much.
One Bud Light.
Yeah.
And he's got a big bar downtown Nashville, you know.
Wow.
Yeah, I heard it impacted their sales by 30%.
Oh yeah,
30%. Yeah, so that's a big number.
Up or down?
down.
Down in the south, up in San Francisco?
Down. No, down.
You and Rita were going to Ireland soon, right? Isn't that right, Joe?
What was that?
Aren't you and Rita going and making a trip to Ireland soon? Aren't you supposed to be going to Ireland?
Yeah, she wants to go to Ireland. She wants to go to Italy. And in, 4 weeks, I think we're going to Hawaii for the first time. Neither one of us have been to Hawaii, so we're looking forward to that. But she's a Michelob Ultra person. In fact, her ex-husband was the Budweiser rep that started the Michelob Ultra golf bags. And they were the ones that first put the logos on the golf bags for the golfers, and big promotion. And now you see the logos on everything in golf, the shirts, the hats, and even now that Nike's gotten out of the golf business, they still have golf shoes, they have golf apparel, they have golf hats, but
and that's how I met David Faraday and Gary McCord through Rita.
Through Peter.
Yeah, through Peter. And I just got a note from Faraday the other day. He says he's living life on a live tour, because he jumped over, and I miss his commentary on NBC drastically because he's no longer covering the PGA Tour. But I saw him on the Live Tour 2-3 weeks ago, and he's doing a fine job.
You know, we were at the Live Tour in Orlando here the other day. Larry Ziegler and a couple of his friends got us tickets to go sit on the ninth grandstand. And it was a well-run tournament. You know, the thing that is good about it is they start at 1 o'clock or 1:30, and it's a shotgun.
Yeah, they all finish at the same time.
Whoa,
4.5 hours, it's over. You know, you watch that last day at the Masters, that was an all-day event. I mean, and of course we were lucky. We knew the owner of the golf course, so we got free drinks and free food. And Larry complained about that, but that's the way Larry is. But the point is, I went to college with a couple of PGA Tour officials, John Brindle and Mark Russell. And through that, I met this guy named Slugger White, who Greg Norman hired to be the tour official for the Live group. Slugger retired from the PGA, was at home, you know, living a retired life, and Norman called him and said, why don't you come to work for us and help us set this up, because we don't have anybody with tour qualifications that can set up the golf courses and everything. So he went back to work for him, and he says he pays him a lot better than PGA pay.
Yeah.
Of course, they're doing it to the golfers too, but I'm not so sure that the negativity of that tour is hurting them at all, because they got deep pockets. They got plenty of money.
Yeah,
Slugger told me this. He said, The PGA Tour players should be tickled to death because it's amazing how much money the PGA Tour found
Correct.
to pay their people to keep them.
Correct.
All of a sudden,
Well, it'll be interesting to see 2-3 years if the Live Tour is still around, but it's certainly both the PGA players and the Live Tour players are benefiting from it now.
Absolutely. You know, if you look back on everything, look back to I want to say, the early AFL, NFL, where they were merging.
By the way,
I know a guy who wrote a book about that.
I know a guy who wrote. I know two guys who wrote a book called Lamar's Gamble: A Tale of the AFL NFL merger, available on Amazon.
Another terrific segue.
Lamar's Gamble: A Tale of the AFL NFL merger, available on Amazon. Go ahead, Joe.
Back to the AFL merger.
You look at how that evolved. Everybody said there's no way the AFL can compete with the NFL. And maybe the first couple of years they didn't, you know, but it was amazing how they evolved into, you know, a sort of sport where, you know, when the Jets beat Baltimore Colts, everybody thought the Baltimore Colts couldn't be beaten at all. And Joe Namath didn't pass against them like he passed against the AFL people.
Right.
He threw to the backside of the backfield. He threw to the tight end. He threw to people that were open. Because the Colts ran a zone defense, and the AFL was running man-to-man. Mm-hmm. And so he exploited what they didn't cover. And that's it's really funny because we all look at what the Super Bowl has turned into. And the first Super Bowl was the Jets against the Colts. The first two games
were the
NFL
championships, right?
That's correct.
They were called the championship game.
That's right.
And it evolved into something as big as it can be. I mean, football has turned. Yeah, you're exactly right. It has turned into an amazing holiday, and it's crazy how big the sport has gotten, and it's gotten that way because there's more people involved. There's more interest in it. I mean, I look back on. We have an old friend named Donnie Anderson. He was a bonus baby for the Green Bay Packers. He got $660,000 in the 60s. He got more money to sign with the Packers than Joe Namath got to sign with the Jets.
Well, that's because of because Joe Namath had gotten all that money, didn't it? Wasn't that the reason?
No, Joe didn't get the money that Donnie got.
Oh, yeah. Well, who came first, Joe or Donnie?
I think it came out about the same time.
Yeah.
Do you think that football is more popular than baseball because of the American psyche, because of even the way the game is set up? The game is made for television. I mean, football is made for television, in my opinion, because of the amount of time, you know, between plays, and they show you the extra replays and all that, the different angles, and it seems like it's a game. Even the game, the field itself is set up like a TV screen. You know, left to right, left to right. Do you think it's more?
Not only that, the ball moves slower than a pitch ball or a hit ball. So if you notice that you go watch a baseball game live or even hockey live, it's exciting live because you can see everything. But the puck and the baseball move too fast for the camera. They have to put it in slow motion for you to understand everything that's happened. And but football is two teams running into each other and it's like a chess game, and it's really funny. You look at the early Oakland Raider teams where the Oakland Raiders had Darryl LaMonica, George Blanda, and Kenny Stabler, and LaMonica started.
Yep.
But Blanda and Stabler are in the Hall of Fame.
Yep.
Well, yeah.
Well, I think also
that's great.
I think also the gambling plays a big part of it, because gambling. Well, Billy knows he was a former bookmaker in the 60s and 70s. You know how big a part gambling has always been a part of football.
Without a doubt. And what Joe said before about the AFL and the NFL merger, you know, and how important television was. I mean, television made the AFL stick around. If they didn't get that contract, they weren't hanging around. It was the contract that they got from television. And we read this year that gambling is going to be more income to the NFL this year than television, which is mind-boggling to me.
Yep.
Well, if baseball were to tell you the truth, the same thing's happening to them. because they wouldn't be giving these ball players that kind of money if they weren't getting the income from the gambling. They get 1% of everything gambled in Vegas. Now think about that. You're the bookie. 1% of everything gambled on baseball in Vegas goes to Major League Baseball.
That's crazy. That's great. But baseball's always been behind the curve of football in everything they do. And this is gambling's one more.
I wonder who negotiated that. I mean, how they were able to negotiate that with all the casinos, that their product would get 1% of everything laid down.
Well, Manfred's a good negotiator.
Apparently. Apparently.
Yep.
He's a very good negotiator. And you got to realize that you say that baseball's always been behind the curve. You know, do you remember the first All-Star game? Of course not. It was in the 30s.
It was 1933. 1933 in Chicago.
Yeah.
And look at that,
Frank! Yeah, but baseball was ahead of the curve there for sure.
No, they weren't. They didn't want the All-Star game. The owners didn't want it. The Chicago Tribune put the All-Star game on, the first one. They said, we'd like to have an All-Star game because the World's Fair is here this year. So we'd like to have the best players from both leagues come in and play against each other in sort of an exhibition game. And the owners in baseball said, we don't want any part of that. We're not paying for it. So the Chicago Tribune said, that's all right, we'll pay for it. And they made so much money on it that the owners took it away from them.
Wow. Money goes to money.
Didn't
the first All-Star game, the owners didn't want any part of it. And nobody knows that. Nobody realizes that. It's amazing. They don't want to put any money out there that they don't see an immediate return on. Yep. And they've been that way forever.
Well, I think the All-Star game was helped by the fact that Carl Hubbell, that first All-Star game, struck out Murderers Row. 6 guys in a row with Ruth Gehrig and on downward in the lineup.
Well, absolutely. And plus, it brought the leagues together for a game other than the World Series where you could see the other teams.
Yep.
And that's, again,
it's a fan's dream, too, to be able to go to a game and see that many stars on the field at one time. I mean, that's great for the fans.
Well, what's great for the fans was Joe Weston again with another sterling effort. You always pitch a perfect game, Joe. You always call him right.
The master of segues. The master of segues, Frank, is getting the
Somebody told me one day, he said, you missed that call or you missed that pitch. I said, I'm probably 44 years. I've never missed one. I don't call them all right, but I was out there for all of them.
Yeah. Well, as Jim Palmer said last week, he's hopeful of seeing you in the Hall of Fame, and so are we. Good to talk to you, my friend.
You're very kind.
To you, Joe, always. You'll be there.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you, brother.
All right. Joe always delivers, doesn't he?
He's the man. He's the man. I was going to tell him that when he was going to Ireland, that I was shocked the other day. I just read recently that Budweiser is actually selling more than Guinness in Ireland now, which is
what?
Yeah, well, that's the way the world's going. The homogenation of the world. That's a classic site.
It's owned by a European company, so maybe that's why.
Yep. Yeah.
What is Budweiser?
Yeah, sure. It's been sold to Heineken or somebody.
Is that right?
Yeah.
When did that happen?
$40 billion, like maybe, I don't know, a long time ago, like 6-7 years ago,
wow.
Maybe 10 years ago.
That's a subject for another day.
Derek, can you get our guest Ryder Strong on? Actor, producer, director, screenwriter, par excellence.
Par excellence. There you go.
Yeah, we'll do.
There he is.
Oh, somebody's.
There he is.
I get to see myself twice. All right.
How you doing, my friend?
Good. How you doing, man?
Good. That's Billy O'Connor.
How are you, Ryder? Nice to meet you, pal.
Yeah, good to meet you too.
That's
Pleasure.
Derek. So this is officially started. This podcast is officially started. We did a little bit of stuff before you. Now we're so excited to have you on. Writer, producer, actor, screenwriter, director, podcaster par excellence.
Yeah. Yeah, now professional podcaster is down up there.
Professional podcaster. And actually, you're making money out on it, as opposed to us.
Wait a minute, you're making money in a podcast? That's some kind
You know what's crazy? I did a book podcast. I'm still kind of doing it. It's called Literary Disco. I started it in 2011, so I did that for 10 years, which was it was so much work. It was reading books. Every 2 weeks we would do it was basically like an audio book club. It took so much research, so much. I never made a dime. Right? and then this rewatch podcast for Boy Meets World comes up, and we actually have advertising, and we got signed by iHeart, who actually they figured out how to make money off of podcasts. So yeah, it's become a real job.
Yeah,
Amazing.
and you guys, Ryder was one of the co-stars, one of the stars of Boy Meets World, as everybody knows, and now it's been a revival of Boy Meets World, and it's incredible. You're playing to sold out houses across the United States, aren't you?
Yeah, we're going to be going on tour this year. It's crazy. Yeah, I mean, I guess in a lot of ways, it's just the way culture works in cycles, right? Like certain people come of age with a TV show, and like when Boy Meets World was on, we got okay ratings, but we weren't like a hit show. It wasn't like the bigger shows were Home Improvement or Seinfeld, but there were shows that were getting a lot more attention, but we were flying under the radar. Kids were watching us, and now those kids are 40-year-old people with their own families, and they loved the show, and it's such an integral part of their childhood. So our podcast really struck a chord, for us to be able to go back and talk about being on the show and watching the show. Like for me, I never watched the show ever, so this is the first time for me to see these episodes. And so it's really like been community building. The fans, they really like feeling, like we're kind of opening, we're showing them a little bit of a glimpse behind the curtain, but mostly we're just kind of hanging out and talking. And I think people just find that comforting. They grew up with us, and now we're all middle-aged, people with families and jobs, and I think they relate to that. So it's a nice thing.
Just think, Billy, if they are middle-aged, what are we?
I know when I hit 60 and somebody was calling me middle-aged, and I said, "That's cool."
I'll make 120.
I'll take 120. Yeah, good luck. Interesting. Your first podcast, the one you did make money off, which is the one I'm interested in, of course, because I don't make any money on a podcast. Frank, we don't make money. But it was about literature. You got your Columbia University English major, is that right?
And a Master of Fine Arts from Bennington.
Yeah.
Hoity-toity.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah, I've always been. It was funny because it was something that happened on the set of Boy Meets World. Like as a kid, I just got really. I was always very academic. I loved school. I still miss school. I would be in college all the time if I could. I mean, I'm teaching now, and that's kind of the way to get that atmosphere. I just love it. I love academia. I love literature, and I couldn't believe when I started college, when Boy Meets World ended, I went to Columbia, and I was just like, oh, you can study books and literature and storytelling. That's considered academic. I was like, that's what I love to do. So yeah, I've just always been into the storytelling in all different forms, including obviously filmmaking, but certainly literature has been a huge part of my life.
So Bill, you're teaching now. What would you say if you were teaching and you had a 58-year-old walk into your class and say, "I want to take a class with you, sir. I'll be 58 and I will be 62 when I graduate." I'm speaking of you, Billy. You didn't even realize.
I kind of realized you were talking about me. I went back to school at 58 years old.
Yeah,
got my degree at 62 or 63. A degree in journalism. Not that I wanted to be a cub reporter, but where are you teaching now? Are you teaching English Lit? Is that what you're teaching?
No, I'm actually teaching screenwriting at Chapman University, right down in Orange County. So it's at the film school there. But yeah, so I'm mostly showing movies and talking about how to write feature scripts. So it's what's the irony is of all the things that I've studied. I was an English major, undergraduate, and then I got my my MFA in fiction writing, I've never taken a screenwriting course. So that's the one thing. That's what I'm teaching. Yeah, that's so of all the things I've studied. But it's what I've been doing primarily for the last 10 years is screenwriting. So it's just what I've learned how to do by doing it and growing up in the industry. And I love talking about it too. So.
And you're following in the footsteps of our past guest, Jeff McCracken.
Exactly. No, yeah, I remember Jeff brought me down to talk to his class when he was teaching at Chapman. Jeff is it's funny how much of my life has followed in Jeff's footsteps because he was such a mentor as a director on Boy Meets World, and then when I started directing Girl Meets World, I definitely looked up to Jeff and looked at him as a model for how to, be a great director. And then, sure enough, here I am teaching at Chapman, where he used to do too.
So let's talk about. I get Girl Meets World and Boy Meets World quick messed up.
You confuse them.
But let's talk about Boy Meets World. You were how old when you were cast in that part? And tell about how you got along with Will and Danielle and Ben Savage and how that whole thing came about. Dynamic.
So I was 13 years old, and it's funny. In retrospect, I was already kind of at the time the show was just a pilot. It was called the Untitled Ben Savage Project. So the whole thing was being built around Ben. As far as I know, it was Fred Savage, his brother, had been doing the Wonder Years, and that show was ending. And I think ABC wanted to keep it in the family, and they knew Ben was a talented actor, so they were like, let's create a show for Fred's younger brother. And sure enough, they paired Ben with Michael Jacobs, who was the executive producer, creator, and showrunner, and the two of them got along great. So Michael, and at the time he was writing with a woman named April Kelly, they created this pilot. I got cast as the best friend. I had 2 lines, I think, in the pilot. It was a tiny part. But I was a regular, and I had already done a TV series with Julie Andrews, and I remember and I thought that show was going to last forever. I had done 6 episodes, and then it got canceled. So I was already kind of cynical at the age of 13. I was like, "Oh, what is this Ben Savage project? It'll never last." And we ended up going for 7 years. I didn't really have many expectations. It was just another job. I was a kid actor. I'd only been acting for 3 years professionally, but like I said, I was already kind of cynical and sort of, didn't have high expectations, and ended up being, an amazing experience. It took, so we did the pilot. The show then got picked up. They replaced some of the cast members. I didn't get replaced. I made it into the series. We got picked up for our first 13, and that's when they brought in Will Friedle. And we were about 4 or 5 episodes in when Danille Fishel came on to guest star as Topanga, and it was supposed to just be 1 episode. And of course, that dynamic became a cornerstone for the whole show, the love between Corey and Topanga. And then my character kept getting bigger. My part just kept getting bigger week after week. At first, I was just sort of a one-off. I'd be in one scene or part of a side storyline, and they usually would have another best friend. And so I didn't really think that this would become much. I was like, this is great to be on a TV show, but I didn't think that, it would, first of all, last this long, but then also that my character would become such an integral part of the show. But they really developed this friendship between Corey and Shawn. And I also think that, Michael Jacobs, to his credit, is one of these writers who he loves actors, and he writes to his actors. So he would look at, who would be coming in and guest starring, or in my case, would be part of the ensemble. And he would really write to our strengths. And I think he noticed that I was a pretty dramatic kid. I was very emotional. And I liked playing dramatic parts more than I liked the comedy. And so as the show progressed, he started writing to that and gave my character a really rough home life. My dad died, my mom abandoned me, I had all these money problems, and they kept writing to that. And so over the course of the show, what was a comedy show, I became a very dramatic sort of emotional element. it spoke to a lot of people. It worked. And it was really fun. I mean, I love my time on Boy Meets World.
That's great.
But you were cynical at the time, though, which is remarkable to me. How you can get cynical at 13?
I know.
Well, he was cynical about show business.
Yeah, in general.
Not about life, but about show business.
Which leads me to the question. I mean, when you're 13, do you think about the money that you're making, or does it affect you? Or just the career-driven?
Yeah, no, it's funny. I didn't think about the money, which is good in retrospect, right? Like,
right, yeah.
I didn't. I came from a very blue collar family. My mom was a teacher. My dad was a firefighter, and it just. They were very smart and very protective, and they sort of, they were just. I didn't spend my money except. Eventually when I was 16, I got my own apartment and stuff like that. And I was able to buy myself a car, but they were really, they kept our life the same as much as they possibly could. I grew up in a really small town, actually outside of a small town in Northern California in the woods. My parents built the house I grew up in the redwoods. And, they never wanted to leave that, but they never wanted, me and my brother both got into acting, and they really, they wanted our home to always be this sort of safe, permanent place. And so during Boy Meets World, I would fly home every weekend. We would finish rehearsal on Fridays. I would get on a plane and be back at my house, my house up in the redwoods within like 5 or 6 hours. And I would stay there all weekend. And then I'd wake up at 4 a.m. on Monday, and my mom and I would fly back down to LA and do it again. And I think that was a really grounding force. It made me feel like there was this Hollywood thing going on where I was making money and there was fame coming in, and, it was kind of a crazy, chaotic space, but I always felt protected and felt like my real life and my real friends and, we're up in Northern California, and my parents were never going to change. My parents were always going to be the same and always going to be there for me no matter what happened. And that was great. I mean, that just gave me such a sense of security that I think a lot of child actors just don't always get. I think a lot of times when kids start making that kind of money or getting that kind of success, it can easily derail a family. Because suddenly the parents see it as their own meal ticket in some ways, or they just get caught up in the idea of the fame and they want their own attention. It can go bad very easily. But in my family, I felt very protected and secure. And it was always like, hey, this is a bonus. This is a fun, cool thing. If you ever stop liking this, that's okay too. So yeah, I was really lucky to be born into the family I was. So
you felt like a blue collar guy, doing a job was just a job, et cetera. But it's interesting, like you said, how, the Romans have a great saying. They say, those whom the gods would destroy, they make successful young.
That's great. I like that.
Yeah. Well, so many people, especially child, they go their ways, but that really helped ground you. Your old man was I was a fireman for 20 years in the Bronx.
Yeah, I know.
And your dad was in Pennsylvania, right? Is that where he was a fireman?
He was from Pennsylvania, but he was a firefighter in San Francisco.
In San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, and he did the full deal. He did the 20 years.
Yep, he became a lieutenant. And retired after 25 years, I think. And he loved it. It was a great job. He also was a Vietnam vet. And for him, it was, he came back from the war, and he was very conflicted about our involvement. And I think for him, becoming a firefighter was his way of sort of getting the same rush that he got in the military.
Yeah, I get it.
But saving lives. It was sort of like, okay, now I'm not taking lives, I'm saving lives. But it gave him the same adrenaline and the same sense of importance, and it was a really healthy thing. He loved it. He didn't love the politics of San Francisco in the 80s. It was a crazy time to be in the fire department. There was a consent decree going on. There's a lot of it's just a really intense political time. In fact, I think it was like his first year in the job that the firefighters went on strike. It's a crazy history, but he loved the job and retired. But I mean, honestly, the best part about it were the hours, right? Because he was able to be there for me and my brother as a father because you get those shifts and then you can trade, right? So he would be able to trade his shifts and get like a week or two off in a row and come to LA and visit us and be there for us, and then work, 4 or 5 days in a row or however many he would add it up.
Yeah, we call them mutuals.
Yeah. Well, such a great system, man. It was just the best. It's the best job for a father to have, because you can still be in your kids' lives. And it was, and with our schedule, because we were my brother and I, because of the acting thing, our schedules were so crazy, but we always felt like he was in our life. He was able to like trade and get there and be there for us whenever we had a big event or a show or something. It was a great job.
Is he still with us?
Yeah. Yeah, he's 80 this last year, so we'll be turning 81 in a month or so.
And how about your mom? Is your mom still alive too?
Yeah,
mom's still alive. She must be delighted to see you teaching, right? I mean, she must be just thrilled about that.
Well, we might want to get his dad.
Yeah.
No, I mean, on our we do an annual show every year about
Vietnam,
about Vietnam and 9/11.
Veterans, yeah.
And he and Billy share so many.
Yeah, I was a Vietnam vet, and he was also a fireman for 20 years. We got a lot in common.
It's so crazy. That's so cool.
Both lieutenants.
Yeah.
I mean, the bar was obviously much lower in New York for a lieutenant. But like one of the mayors of New York said, it was the best. What did Koch say?
Koch called it the best part-time job in America, being a New York City fireman. But of course, like you said, your dad had got all that extra time. He got mutuals. He got to see your career blossom. I had a lot of extra time on my hands, so what I did was open up a bar and did the predictable thing with it. I went the other way. I was watching my kids being raised through heavy lenses. And I was banging away.
Well, to your credit, you put the plug in the jug at 58, and you went back to college.
I went to college.
Yeah, that's great.
Late years.
So, Ben told me when you guys were coming up, you were impervious to your fame to a degree because there was no social media, there were no anything. So you didn't really feel as famous as you were until maybe I recall he said you went to Disneyland or someplace, and the people were streaming, were sprawling all over you, and you didn't realize that you had become famous until midway into that. Where now, with the kids today, they're on Instagram or TikTok, and it's almost instantaneous the fame. And Ben felt, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but Ben felt protected sort of from that fame. How did you feel?
Yeah, I agree. It was a much better time to be famous, I would say. But I also think I know when we worked on Girl Meets World, watching those kids get instant feedback, on their phones. An episode goes out, or even on tape nights, they would be getting feedback from people in the audience. Like that would drive me crazy. That would have gone, oh my God, it would have been so bad. I did end up, what happened to me, which was not super fun, was there was this culture of teen magazines.
Yes.
And that doesn't really exist anymore. I mean, I guess that was the sort of social media of the time, right? It was like this.
And you were the cover boy on a lot of those teen magazines.
And that was really hard for me. That was not, and I think, it was a bummer because I did those interviews and photo shoots because I thought that they were, at that age, I didn't distinguish between the New York Times and a teen magazine. I just thought somebody wants to interview me. They're a journalist. Great. Not realizing that I was sort of feeding into this, teen idol status that I didn't really want. I wanted to be an actor. I took myself very seriously. I wanted to be a real actor. I wanted to, and instead I sort of found myself in this pinup position, which I was never comfortable with. What was nice about the actual job, the day-to-day job, was that we were protected. On the set and in our mostly, I would say 99% of our day-to-day lives, we could go about not getting recognized because adults didn't know who we were. Our show wasn't a hit with anybody over the age of 15. But yes, if we went to Disneyland, if we went to the mall, If we went anywhere where there would be groups of kids, it would be insane. And what happened, the show ended, and I immediately went to New York to go to college. And my whole goal was like, just keep my head down, take a break from acting and focus on English and the things I wanted to study. But the show started playing reruns on Disney Channel, and we became even more popular. And so if I was on the subway when schools let out in New York, the kids would they would freak out. And I was like, what? I thought the show was over. My life was going to go back to normal. But the show ended up being a hit for another, 10 years in reruns, and found a whole new younger generation. So still, I couldn't go anywhere with kids for so long. It was awful.
But that I don't want to say jump-started, but that started your career as a director.
Yeah.
And you directed, 18 episodes of Boy Meets World?
Of Girl Meets World.
Girl Meets World.
18 episodes.
And you and Shiloh, who was your brother, were directing in tandem. And Michael said, I want these guys to direct. And I said, okay. And then he said, well, they're a team. So we had to negotiate through the DGA because the DGA didn't allow, at that time, TGA didn't allow teams.
We had to go in front of a board at the DGA and make an argument that we are a functioning creative team, that we basically function as an individual, which the real reason they do that, as far as I can tell, is so producers don't take advantage of having two directors, right? Because the first thing a producer, if they're smart, would want to do is split them up and get 2 units for the price of one. And so the DGA, has to make sure that essentially the directors that work as teams won't do that. That they will basically function as an individual, which we did. And I think it's no surprise that there are a lot of brother director teams out there, because when you're siblings, you sort of do grow up learning how to think with one mind, and how to have quick, easy communication, and each other so well. Shiloh and I used to work together. We don't direct together anymore. We used to write and direct together everything, and then we've since split up, and now we kind of do our own things. But Shiloh's more of a visual storyteller than I am. He's a photographer, and I was always more the word-based guy. So when we came together, sort of like combining our powers.
Is there any episode of Boy Meets World that's amongst your favorites, or a couple of favorites that you have? And why? I think my favorite episodes are the ones that we had the most fun making as a group. So we did this one episode. It's kind of a legendary episode. It's this weird horror episode. It's like where our characters find themselves trapped in a horror film, and it turns out to all be a dream sequence. So it's very surreal, and but the best part about it is that because it's this dream sequence, and because it's sort of this alternate reality version of Boy Meets World, all of us in the cast, so Will Friedle and Matt Lawrence and Danielle and Ben and me, we all got to be in scenes together for the first time in a while, because usually the way that the show would work, the way sitcoms work, you have an A storyline and a B storyline, sometimes a C storyline. And so they would split the cast up, right? You have these 4 characters dealing with this situation in the A storyline, and then these 3 or 4 characters in the B storyline, and none the twain shall meet. And that would happen a lot. And so this was a particular episode where we were all together in every scene, and we were all kind of playing like this alternate heightened reality. So we all kind of got to get out of our comfort zone. And oh my God, we had so much fun. And poor Jeff McCracken, who you mentioned earlier, was directing this episode. And Jeff is like the nicest, most calm guy in the world, but he lost it because we could not stop laughing. We couldn't get through a scene. We were having so much fun and just cracking each other up. It's the only time I've ever heard Jeff yell, was he yelled at us during the filming of that episode. But
that was the most fun I've ever had filming anything, and we all feel the same way. So that's my favorite episode. The episodes like that where I can just remember us behind the scenes just having so much fun. And then I haven't watched the show otherwise, so I'm watching it now with this rewatch podcast. We're in season 2 now. And I don't remember any of this. I'm watching this going like, oh, I know that's me. I'm up there acting. I obviously was there, but I have no recollection of doing this scene or this storyline.
Yeah, I often look at, I've produced over 700 episodes.
Yeah.
There's sometimes that I don't even remember what happens in an episode anymore.
That's remarkable.
It's just crazy. I thought I would save them all because I would want to look at them as I got older.
Right.
Yeah.
But it just becomes a job, right? I mean, that's the thing.
The best job in America, but just a job.
Yes, but as far as like you get used to it is what I mean. Like with the first week on a new job is like there's something slightly chaotic. You have to like figure out who your actors are, who your writers are. Everybody's got to like learn each other's things. But then you fall into a groove, and then it just becomes week by week. And so you stop. You forget. It just becomes rote. It's like, oh yeah, we're just doing another comedy show with a whole live audience here and all these cameras and all these moving parts. It just becomes your job, and you just you love it, but you're not recording every moment as like really something to remember.
Now that you're looking back on this and you're doing the podcast in 2023 and you're playing to live audiences, what kind of questions does the audience ask you that surprises you?
It's a great question. Because they typically here's what surprises me the most actually about all of it is how invested they are in I'm amazed that people care so much about us as actors being friends. Like, it is bizarre to me, because in the real life experiences, of course, you work together and you portray these characters, and these characters are a group of friends, or in the case of Corey and Topanga, lovers and husband and wife, or brothers. You have these relationships on screen, but off camera, you're just people that work together, right? And you may get along or you may not. You may have moods and days where you don't like each other. There have been whole years where it's like, I don't talk to somebody that I worked with on Boy Meets World. That's just normal life, right? But for some reason, because we played these characters and because the show was such an integral part of people's lives, they're so invested in us all being basically the relationships we had on camera. And it's just a weird I get it. Like I can wrap my head around it. But personally, I don't feel that way. Right. Like I don't, and so that's such an interesting disconnect that I always have to kind of be aware of. People come up to me and they sort of assume like, well, you and Ben are best friends. And it's like, no, like, I don't, and they'll say stuff to me in person. They'll be like, well, how's Ben? What's going on? I'm like, I don't know. But because Corey and Shawn were best friends, so it's such a weird, and that is it's just an interesting dynamic that I sort of have to go through the rest of my life, every actor does to a certain degree when you have a hit, when your show is successful. Partly what that means is that they're invested in a fictional version of you, right? Like, and they want that fictional version of you in some ways to be more true than who you really are. And that's just a bizarre thing that I don't think I understood. I don't think anybody really understands when they become an actor, or especially not a kid who becomes an actor. Like, you don't know that. Like, I don't think I ever would have thought at the age of 13 that the job I had then would still be like a huge part of my life. You
didn't think that you and Will would still be hearing Phoenix.
Exactly. Do the Phoenix. I was like, oh my God. Yeah, it never goes away.
You become a commodity, I guess. I'm not in the business, so I guess.
It's like the Fonz with A.
Yeah, hey, that's Dynamite.
Yeah.
Dynamite. The other one.
Yeah, and you have to come to terms with it, right? You have to like, because I think for a long time I resisted it, and I let it make me very unhappy, because I'm in my 20s and my 30s, going like, I'm not just this character. This is not just my, I have other things. I care about books. I write my own stuff, and eventually, only relatively recently have I sort of come to terms with like, why, I don't know if I need to fight this. And instead I can kind of be proud of it, and actually own it and be comfortable with it. And I think, part of that is just age, getting older and being like, oh, right, this isn't going away, and this is my life. And then another part of that is like I said, being kind of proud of the accomplishment that the show, that, I think I always looked, because I was a kid when it started, I didn't feel like I had as much control. I didn't feel like I had as much ownership over Boy Meets World. It was sort of like this thing that was, created by these other people, and I just played a part in it. But now when I watch the show, I can be like, no, like I knew what I was doing. Like I did a good job. I brought something of me to this, and changed the course of the show with what I was able to bring, and I just coming to terms with that and being like, oh, that's cool. Like that brought a new element to the show, and that worked. And I can see that with my fellow actors too. When I look at like Danielle and Will, is like one of the funniest human beings I've ever met. And like his contribution to Boy Meets World is like, it's immeasurable. And it's just, so, getting older, coming to terms with these things.
And yet Will was reticent about appearing on Girl Meets World.
Yeah. Well, he went through a phase, and I'm not talking out of turn here. He's very, very open about this. He went through some severe anxiety, a period in his life where, acting became a trigger for panic attacks for him. So he had to stop. He had to stop acting, because he just didn't, he would get in front of an audience or in front of a camera on set and just feel like he was dying, which is horrible. And so it was sort of, the Girl Meets World was one of the first times I think he had done on-camera acting, because what the outlet he found was voice acting.
Voice acting, yeah.
Yeah, which was great, and he's been able to have a remarkable voice acting career, and he loves it. But it didn't trigger any of the same anxiety. So coming on Girl Meets World was a big step for him towards, getting back on camera. And
I think it was therapeutic for him as well.
Very therapeutic. Yeah, it was sort of exposure therapy. It's like if you're gonna get on camera again, do it in an environment that is safe and surrounded by people that love you and have worked with you since you were a teenager. And it worked, he says he hasn't done much on camera, but he says he's ready to. He's really interested in acting again. I don't think he wants to audition again, which is gonna make it hard to get those jobs. But I think he wants to be on camera again and do another show or something.
And all of you guys have developed successful careers. I know Danielle is probably one of the best, I say young directors in sitcoms today, because she directs for the actors. She was an actor. She directs for actors. She still works as an actress, but she also knows where to put the cameras, because she watched people like Jeff McCracken and people like Joel Zwick. She learned how to put the cameras and why the cameras are where they are. And so she directs cameras and actors. And that's as did you and Shiloh, direct cameras and actors. And it's so marvelous to find that in directors in sitcoms, because now, people don't really care about the directors. They just want to hire. They just want to hire their friends, and that's
short-sighted.
Short-sighted. I was thinking of the right word. I wasn't having one of my moments. I was thinking of the right words, but it's short-sighted.
Yeah, well, I mean, and I do think that there is a tendency for directors to fall on one side of that equation, right? Like they're either very good with the technical side, the camera side, or they're great with actors. And to find somebody who can do both is really tricky. Because often, especially old school directors, they'd come up from theater. So they would be great with actors, or they would have been actors themselves, but they just don't have the brain for visual storytelling and understanding all the kind of crass legwork that goes into mapping out a sitcom or mapping out shots. And that's something you just have to learn. Yeah. And like, I think Danille definitely, stepped up to the challenge and taught herself how to do cameras. And like I said, I went through the same thing. It was like, because when you're an actor, you kind of only see a little slice of the experience, right? They bring you on when everybody else has been working for 6 hours or whatever, setting up the lights and building the sets and just miking the room. There's so many stages and so many other that the actors never see. They just show up and everybody's been waiting for them, and then they roll and you start shooting. You get all the attention. Everybody applauds, laughs, and then you go back to your dressing room, and all the other people have to keep working. And so I remember when I first realized like what a director does, it was a shock to me. It was like, oh, there's somebody actually having to make all of these decisions and know where to put the camera, and also, not only know where to put the camera, but also talk to 4 camera operators at the same time and get them to put it in the right spot and do it politely so that they actually want to work with you. And, there's so many dynamics that you had to learn, and I had to learn. And to me, it's always been a super fun and exciting challenge. But I think for some, especially some actor turned directors, they want to stay in that little safe space that acting afforded them, where they didn't have to think about all of these things. They could just show up and act. And unfortunately, you're right. Like in the world of television, directors get taken for granted. And so that job gets kind of passed around or handed out. It'll be like, oh, I can give it to this, the star of the show, and give him a bunch of episodes. And it's like, well, no, that just puts a lot of pressure on the rest of the crew to have to up their game to, if that person doesn't know what they're doing. But other times they do know what they're doing. Like you look at somebody like Danille, who's become, an amazing director. So it's just,
I'm getting the impression by listening to you. I was going to ask you what is your favorite hat to wear? Do you prefer actor, director, producer, screenwriter, whatever? I'm getting the impression that directing is a passion for you more than. Am I right?
Big time, man. That's all I want to do. Yeah, because I thought I would always want to be a screenwriter, but it's lonely. Writing is lonely, and I'm sitting in this room, and you can see my whiteboard with a script I'm working on now. It's like, this is me, whereas directing is storytelling collaboratively. It's working with a whole crew and working with actors. It's just so exciting. It's the most fulfilling job in the world. It's like almost like a drug, you get this high because you have to be so present. You have to be making a million decisions. And
everybody's hanging on those decisions.
Exactly. You have all these people and all this money and all this equipment waiting and hinged on your, yes or no, or do this or don't do that. And so because of that, you have to sort of get into this Zen space. Actually, a great example of this is, Frank, do you remember when we were doing the rodeo episode of Girl Meets World? Where we had to do a whole exterior shoot with a rodeo, and Michael Jacobs had written something like 38 pages for us to shoot in one day. It was insane. It was like, of course, it was impossible. And I remember Frank calling me and being like, "Can you please tell Michael that this is impossible?" And I had to get on the phone with Michael and be like, "Yeah, Michael, this is impossible." Like we all had to like come at him from a million sides to get him to rewrite it, but we still ended up, I think, with like 20 pages that we had to shoot in a day and a stunt with an actual bull rider. It was a lot, and it was so hectic. We had done like all this pre-planning. We had made all these decisions, and we were shooting in June, I think, in Los Angeles. And out of nowhere, it started to rain right before lunch. It like just started to drizzle, which never happens. It's like that's why the Hollywood industry is in Los Angeles, because you don't have to deal with the weather, right? And it started raining, and it was like the worst thing that could possibly happen, because that means we're going to have to shut down everything if it keeps raining. But I was so in directing mode that I remember just laughing, because you just reach this point of like, you're so in it. You're like, I just remember being like, all right, we're going to deal with this now. We're going to have to get through the rain and shoot. And I just, it ended up, we went to lunch and we came back and it didn't rain. It worked out great. But I always think about that moment as like one of those
defining moments.
What?
Defining moments.
Yeah, like where you just like I just knew that like even if everything goes wrong, I was so happy to be directing and to be like present, and you're just rolling with the energy of the set. I mean, that's all I want to do is direct. I just want to get back into that seat again because it's such a feeling of like energy and yet equanimity. Like I find this sort of Zen mental space that I just crave. I want it so bad. So yeah, I mean, that's all I want to do. I don't know if I would want to direct television as much because being a television director, you know, you are sort of second to the writers. The writers have
you're a traffic cop.
Yeah,
you're a traffic cop. The days of multiple camera directors having a point of view is in the past.
Yeah,
they're just basically traffic cops.
Exactly.
They're doing, and I, you know, we wrote this book, If These Lips Could Talk, when I thought I was retired. So I said probably a couple of things there in that book that I, you know, shouldn't have said at the time because I'm still working now. But fuck it, I thought it then and I think it now. Unfortunately, you know, traffic cops are what those people do, and somebody comes down on the set for a table read, a run through, and a shooting, and they believe they're qualified to say who's going to be directing when they're not on the stage at all, and they don't see where the work is done and who's doing the work, and you know, whether the actors have to take over the set or whether the camera coordinator has to take over the camera coordinating. There used to be a time when the director had a point of view. Now the director is just trying to get rehired for the next time and to get a good reference from the executive producer.
Now, let me ask you guys both. Is it because of the multi-camera? Is it because of the extra number of people that are on the set? I mean, what is it that makes a traffic cop? Is it the multi-camera?
It's because the weight of, in my opinion, a writer may be different, but it's because the writer has been given so much power from over everything. The writer is king in television, and they have supported by a battery of, you know, where they used to have 3 or 4, they now have 10 to 12 writers with them, all who have opinions. So there's where that is.
I got you.
But let's get back to your directing career, because you wrote a movie called Irish Twins. Billy's got.
I'm Irish. I was born in Ireland. So, and you had mentioned that Shiloh, your brother, was more visual than you were. You were more literary. You know, and obviously with your degree in literature and everything else, I would lead to that. I'm guessing, and I don't know because I've done a lot of research on you, but I didn't do any research on Shiloh. I'm guessing he's within a year of you. Is he an Irish twin?
No. Well, we're actually a year and a half apart.
Okay, but the title jumps off the page. It's great.
No, I know. Thank you. Yeah, that's what we. I'll send you a link to it. You'll probably get a kick out of it. It was our first short film that we made. It was really I was 26 or 27, and Shiloh was a year and a half older, and we were we were both kind of tired of acting and not having more creative control over our careers. You know, we'd both been in, at that point I was sort of in like this period where I was acting in just worse and worse horror movies. Like that's all I could get. and I just wasn't comfortable. I remember sitting around, like I was unhappy on sets. And I remember finally just being like, I can't be this unhappy. I'm becoming one of those angry actors that I knew growing up, that I was like, I'm never going to become those people, because there are a lot of angry actors out there. They're unhappy with their career. And I think it's because you don't have as much agency. You know, you're sort of at the mercy of your context as an actor. And so we decided to write a short film and shoot it. And we just poured everything we had into this 20-minute short. And our thinking, because back then we were still shooting on 35 millimeter film, so the most expensive part of making something back then was the cost of film itself. And so our thinking was, well, we can save money if we put ourselves in it and we write a short for the two of us as actors then we can save money on takes, right? Because we can rehearse a bunch between the two of us before the whole crew shows up, and then on the day we can shoot with as little film as possible and only do like 2 or 3 takes of anything. And it worked, and we made a short that's 20 minutes long. I mean, in retrospect, we should have just made a feature because of the amount. What I didn't know then, you know, what I would tell myself now, after years of more years of experience, is that the hardest part of any project is getting started, right? A film project or a television project. Once you're going, it's easier to just keep going. And so we spent all this energy and time and money putting together a 3-day shoot when we should have just done a 10-day shoot and probably made a whole feature. But what we ended up with was I think it's about 22 minutes short. I'm still very, very proud of it. It looks amazing. And that's where we really cut our teeth as directors. And yeah, the title, we play brothers who were born within a year of each other, and their father, who is an alcoholic, has died, and they have his ashes in a bar. And the one brother, who's kind of a big drinker himself and going through some problems, wants to take the dad's ashes back to Ireland, and they get into a fight about it, and it becomes this whole.
Oh, I'm definitely going to look on the link, and I'm definitely going to check
I'll send
this
you a
out
link.
without a doubt. I'm definitely going to check it out. Irish Twins. I really, it leaps off the page. The title, it really does.
Thanks.
I thought you were going to ask me a question because I got so many.
No, I'm sorry, Frank. I had to lead a question. I was just
pondering the fact that
Irish Twins. I started to think about the ashes, the drunk father. My wife was flashing in front of me. He was drowning, and my wife was passing in front of me.
And your father's name was King Arthur?
Yeah.
What is the derivation of that name?
So it was just his mother's maiden name was Arthur, so he's always going to have the middle name Arthur. And then I guess his dad had a friend who was named King, and they just thought it was a great idea to name him King, and then it was like, oh, King Arthur Strong. It's like, and lucky for my dad, he's a big guy, and he's very he lives up to his name. So Marine firefighter, it was okay, but it's a lot of pressure to put on a kid, King Arthur Strong.
Marine firefighter. I mean, he's a man after your own heart.
The Marine in Vietnam is far distant from what I was in Vietnam. Yeah. I mean, believe me, when I see a Marine, and I still bow my head to this day every time I see a Marine walk by. So you should be proud of your father, because
thank you. I am definitely.
Those guys were the real deal over there.
And to be a fireman as well, because you guys are trained to, I would be running away from the blaze. You guys would run into it.
Like Ryder talked about, his father liked the juice. The juice.
Oh,
it's like it's. I used to see guys. You pull up. It's blowing through 5 windows. It's blowing through the roof. And guys would light up. They'd be like, "Yeah, it's blowing through the roof. It's blowing through the roof." Really, that's the way it was on the job.
What he didn't like was the medical calls. Because that's the
stuff.
That's the majority of what they would do is the med calls, and he hated them. He loved fire. So you kidding me?
That's what the South Bronx was like back in the day. I mean, we got an EMS call. It was the bus is here. Get out of here. Take up. The EMS is here. Let's get out of here. And that was my attitude. Let's get out of here as quickly as possible.
Well, you were a firefighter in the Bronx when the Bronx was burning.
Yeah, and then fire Bronx and Harlem. I mean, I think my company was doing 14,000 runs a year.
Ooh.
14,000. We were out all the time. 7, 8. Nobody went to sleep. 7, 8 times a night. And we'd have 3 or 4 workers.
Wow.
And
yeah, we got to get his dad on.
Oh yeah, it'd be a lot of fun talking to his dad for sure. I mean, but I tell you, again, Marine in Vietnam, different ball game. I was in the Air Force, and whole different ball game. It might as well have been 2 different armies.
And your son Indy now is almost 9 years old.
He's 8. Yeah,
Indy.
Oh, God. Yeah. Yeah. It's been a great year because I feel he's in 2nd grade, and in conversations with him, I'm realizing I remember second grade. Like I remember everything about my second grade year. Like, and so I feel like his brain is it's come online. Like you're like, oh, you now you're a person. We're having conversations that you're going to remember 20 years from now, and it's just fun. It's a new stage in parenting. I feel like because up until now, it's like you obviously you think you're saying stuff that's going to sink in or be important or last, but now it's like it's on a conscious level, and it's really fun. So now when we watch movies together, we talk about things. I know that they're actually becoming part of his core memories. And he's such a great kid. He's so fun, and he loves. I mean, he's not an actor yet, but he's very performative. He's very funny, and he loves movies. He likes making his own little movies. He does stop motion film. So I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up in the industry. My wife is an actor and a producer too. So where I think it's kind of unavoidable at this point that he'll probably end up following in the family.
Does he watch
Reruns.
Does he watch the reruns with you?
No, he did for a little while. When we started the podcast, I thought I would watch every episode with him. And the first season he did, and he really enjoyed it. Second season started, and he said too much kissing. It was too weird for him to watch like me at 14 making out with girls, and I was like, all right, that's fair enough, dude. Like, Boy Meets World did age pretty quickly between seasons 1 and 2. And I think we lost him for now. I wouldn't be surprised if he comes back around, because he does like multi-camera sitcom. That's what's funny is like people talk about multi-camera sitcom kind of being this ancient art form where they don't. But the truth is, kids love it.
Kids love it.
Kids still love it. That's why Disney does it and Nickelodeon. They do it because kids are open to it and they think it's really fun. In a way that grown-ups, I feel like now we don't really, people don't really want to watch multi-camera anymore, but the kids still love it.
Yeah,
so I wouldn't be surprised he comes back around.
We went through the same thing on the George Lopez show. We were a hit. We were on the show for 5 years, but we became a mega hit when Nickelodeon started running reruns.
Yep.
And they run it, and they still run it today. I still get residuals from the show I wrote.
Amazing.
It is amazing. It is amazing. Derek, you got questions?
I do. I have one particular question. I have one question. It's actually a request. So you are a teacher,
mm-hmm.
and you like to teach.
Mm-hmm.
So I would love, you have the board in the back. I'd love to get a quick crash course in screenwriting. Since
no.
A quick course in screenwriting is quick. Quick course in an art form that takes often 5 years.
Yeah, I think it would be great. Just a quick, concise 2-minute course.
All right. So the main thing to know about screenwriting, as opposed to other forms of writing, is it is incredibly structured. It is all about structure. It's sort of like building a table. It has to have certain parts, and the reason for that is that it's you're not writing. When you're writing a novel, you can have a little bit more wiggle room when it comes to structure, because people can pick up a book, they can read it for a couple minutes or an hour or two, and then they can put it down and walk away. Right? The experience is not an experience in time. Whereas when you're screenwriting, what you're doing is you're creating an image-based experience in time. And so it's really important. The hardest thing I think for beginning writers to wrap their head around is remembering that the attention span, the human attention span, is actually very limited and very there are, I don't know if there's like built into us. There's certainly part of our culture at this point. We only last about 90 minutes to 2 hours. We can only sit through watching and experience our story with a certain amount of turns within that time. You think about it like in music, right? You could write a 90-minute song, right? But that's not what people really want to listen to. People want to listen to about 3 to 5 minutes, and they want to have a chorus and a bridge, and then a couple of verses, and then that's it. And it's the same with movie writing, right? We want to break it into 3 acts. All movies are 3 acts. We want to have a midpoint right about 50 to 60 minutes in. Certain things should happen. Certain changes should happen. And that doesn't take away the creativity. That actually enhances the creativity. And so what I, is basically spend the first half of my semester teaching students is just get used to structure, learn it. And you can find a million screenwriting books that teach all sort of versions of this. But the basic idea is it's 3 acts. You have 25 minutes to hook your audience. That's the first act. And within about 12 to 15 minutes in, you have to have a catalyst, or sometimes it's called the inciting incident. That changes everything for your main character. And then they're faced with a choice, and they have to make a choice that will change the course of their life in some way or their situation. And that's when they make that choice and they go into the second act of your story. That's going to hit right about minute 24 to 26. So that's 24 to 26 pages into your script. You have to have your break into 2. Now you're into the second act. That's going to last you from page 25 all the way through till about 85 or 80, 75 to 80. And then there are some other guideposts along the way. You want to have a midpoint in there, like I said, and then you're going to have, what Blake Snyder, who's one of the sort of leading structure arguers in screenwriting, calls the all is lost moment right near the end of the second act. All is lost. And then that's when like everything gets bad for everybody, and your characters at the worst, lowest point. That's usually in the part of the movie where your character is literally captured by the bad guys, or apart from the person they love, or the friendship is never going to work. All the bad things, and then they have a new idea, and you break into your third act. So yeah, I mean, those are the structure is the hardest part to wrap your head around, and like I said, it's actually the easiest to learn. The hardest part is that we all have this sort of, if you want to be a writer, if you want to be a storyteller, there's a kind of romantic idea inside all of us that we don't need structure, right? That we can just start telling a good story, or I can just express myself, or write about the way, the relationship I had with my, the love of my life, and that just makes a good story. But the truth is, you need structure to almost every storytelling, and you need suspense. You need the audience to be excited to find out what's going to happen next, and it has to have turns and reversals. And like I said, those are, we have 100 and some years of film writing to teach us that people like their stories a certain way. They like it with a certain structure in it. And so embracing that and not fighting against that is the hardest thing for young screenwriters to learn, because, like I said, we have this romantic vision of like, but I could just write and start writing it. And what invariably happens is you might write great scenes, you might have great characters, but as a whole movie, it won't work because you'll lose your audience. You need that structure.
And with regard to structure, you have to put your screenwriting, your writing into a certain form, because if it's not in the right form, and it's not, you don't have your margins set up right, and they
won't even look at it.
They won't even look at it. And each page should be about a minute in single camera. So that's how you can judge how many pages you're writing. If you write 120 minutes, you've written a 2-hour movie.
Yep. Yeah, I've read a few books on screenwriting, and the way writer was expressing it there, this guy made it pretty simple. He said, "Put a guy up in a tree. You put him in a tree, right? And you throw rocks at him. Is he going to get out of the tree? He's not going to get out of the tree.
Exactly.
But always open with action. Everything I've ever read about writing was the ABDCE rule. Action, first action. Don't, show a guy falling out of a plane. Don't tell us how he got there. Then give us the background. Action, background, then character development, then climax, then the denouement.
With the exception would be Columbo.
Columbo, yeah, exactly.
When they solve the scene in the first act, and then you have to find out how Columbo unravels how he catches.
They tell you the murder. Then they got to figure out how to catch. Which was a great series, by the way. Yep. Still to this day, I've
never seen it actually.
Oh, you should watch it.
Because it turns everything upside down. And to this day, I can still watch Columbo. It's so well done, and well acted series too. They always had good guest stars.
Any other questions for Ryder?
No, man, I don't have any more questions for you, but I tell you, it was really nice to meet you. If I was
you
still
too.
drinking, I'd like to have a couple of squirts with you.
Yeah.
Oh, you're old man, even better. I'd like to have a couple of squirts with your old man. I never met him.
Hey,
I
Ryder,
agree, man.
let me ask you a question. What question have you never been asked before that you would ask yourself now about your career, about your life? What question? You've been interviewed by so many people. You've got the Child Star Lifetime Achievement Award.
Yeah.
Now that you're a grown up, what question do you wish you had
That's-
ever been asked?
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, it's a. I don't know. I think.
We'll let you. Go ahead.
Let me say that you know what's the toughest question that I've been asked, and I still don't know the answer to, which is a weird way to answer your question, but I think kind of is and it happened for the first time like 20 years ago. So before I even had a kid, somebody asked me, "Would you let your kid become an actor?" And and I think inherent in that question is a sort of, the question behind the question is, are you happy with having been a child actor? And, do you think it was a worthwhile experience, or if you could change it, would you change it? And I still don't know the answer to that. And I made that joke about Indy being performative and whether we're going to let him, get into the industry. And I often wonder like how my life would have been different had Boy Meets World not happened, right? Like that's sort of like a question. And I don't know the answer to it, like I don't, it's just, like I said, I've spent the last couple years finally coming to terms with this part of my life that I think I ran away from or rejected or wanted to overcome in some way. And now I'm like pretty stoked on my life, like I've been really fortunate. I've never had a non-entertainment industry job. Well, I'm teaching, I guess now, but like, it's all been in the service of creativity and storytelling, which is awesome. Like, oh my God, like what a great thing to have that I've never, I never had to wait a table. I never had to do something that wasn't involved with it. It didn't involve creativity and artistry. And that's just such a gift like that. But I also often wonder, like, would I have been a little happier without, like, cause I never really liked being famous that much. And I didn't like the pressure. So I don't know if that answers your question. But
Okay. Let me ask you another one.
Yeah.
What one, if you're going to die tomorrow,
Mm-hmm.
and you had to watch one movie for the last time before you go, what would that movie be and why?
That's a good question. One of the films that has become one of my favorites of all time is Spirited Away. It's an animated film by Miyazaki. And it's what I show my screenwriting students the first class, and I still think it's one of the most magical films I've ever seen. It's a kids film ostensibly, but I think it's more adult than most adult films as far as the breadth of its worldview and what it has to say. It's a little girl who. It's very much like a Wizard of Oz story. It's a little girl who gets lost in a magical world and is trying to get home. And it has a lot of mythical qualities to it. And it's just world building. But her development as a character is actually very small. She begins the movie scared to be moving to a new town. And then at the end of the movie, she's not scared anymore. And that's basically the progression as a character is very small. But what she does to get there, she enters the spirit world. She flies on dragons. She battles giant. She goes through this huge epic adventure, and it's such an enjoyable ride. And it's such a life affirming movie while being very magical and very visually stunning. So it has all the things that a movie I think should do, and is incredibly structured. Great hero's journey.
Titled Spirited Away.
Spirited Away. Yeah.
And in closing, where are you guys going to be this summer? upcoming appearances?
Yeah, so we're doing a live show here in LA soon. I think in like 2 weeks. So April 26th. And then this summer, gosh, where are we going? I'm not even sure it's set yet exactly where we're going. So I think it'll be in July, but we're definitely going to be doing live shows throughout the country, but I'm not sure exactly where yet.
And
so I can't name names. But
any card shows coming up? Because I know you guys have become big hits in card shows.
Card shows? What do you mean?
Well, card signings.
Oh,
personal appearances.
Conventions. Yeah. I think we have a little bit of time off before the next convention. I know we're going to Tampa. There's a 90s con, which is just all about the 1990s, and they're doing one in Tampa, Florida in the fall. So we'll be there. And then there's Galaxy Con, which is they're throughout the country, but we're going to be doing one in Columbus and then one in Raleigh. And I'm not sure the exact dates. And then I think we're going to be doing one in Texas, in Austin, Texas too.
And the podcast is called Pod Meets World.
Pod Meets World.
And where can you find it?
Everywhere you can find your podcast. Wherever somebody's listening to this, they can type in Pod Meets World.
That's great.
So you two people out there.
I get it. That's hilarious. I got one more question. So I'd like to make this show. We've actually opened up some dreams for people in the show in the past. So people have offered us like the thing they're most interested in doing in their career. So I'm curious the type of you want to direct. You don't necessarily like television. I'd love to know what type of, because Frank makes things happen.
Sure.
Yeah.
So what
writer doesn't need me to make things happen.
Everybody gets connections are connections.
Yeah.
What type of movie would you like to direct? And you don't have to divulge like your particular screen idea, but what types of movies would you love to be a part of?
I definitely want to start in horror. I love, but I want to do what's sort of called elevated horror now. Jordan Peele's Get Out is probably the most classic example, right? Like a movie that is very viscerally entertaining on the surface, but then is actually about something, has something to say about the world. So I love genre stuff. I love horror, comedy. I think it's important that movies are just fun, that we know why we're watching it. And by fun, obviously with a horror film, you're scared, hopefully, or grossed out or, whatever. So it's not always positive emotions, but eliciting emotions and getting a reaction out of your audience and just providing that entertainment is so essential to me. And I feel like so many filmmakers just get their head up their own asses and forget that, right? They forget that we're entertainers. That's what we're supposed to do. So I definitely want to focus on concise, visceral storytelling that just operates on a surface level very well. But then, that has something to say. That has either something about where we're at culturally or the world in general. But like a really, I have thoughts, I have philosophy, I have ideas about the world. And I think, rather than writing essays, which I also might do later on in life, like I want to find a way to get those ideas into story, and make them entertaining and sort of sneak them into people's lives via film. So the project I'm going out with right now and hoping to get cast and make is a horror film, a very contained small horror film, but it's very thought provoking. I want the audience to walk away kind of scratching their head and having to maybe even watch it a second time because they can't quite figure everything out like this. So I would say Chris Nolan style films, where his movies they usually operate on this level where they're very entertaining, but then they also make you think, and you almost want to have to watch it again to go back and revisit. That would be my dream.
Well, you've been entertaining us for 30 years, writer, and I'm sure you'll continue to entertain us for another. Well, entertain America, not necessarily us, for,
Another 30 years.
for another 30 years.
right.
Thanks for being a guest.
Thank
Yeah,
you
of
for
course.
coming
Thank you
on,
guys so much for having me. It was great to
You're a real
meet you.
Shaughnessy. You're an Irish storyteller. That's
All
exactly
right.
what you are. Shaughnessy.
And I'll follow up with you about your dad for sure.
All right, sounds good.
All right,
sounds
thanks,
good.
my friend.
Thank you,
Do
Ryan.
well.
Pleasure meeting
Thank
you,
you,
man.
guys.
Really, thank you. Great guest.
Yes, great,
Fascinating guy.
terrific guest.
You know, I don't know why, but he as we were talking to him, he kept reminding me of my friend Pepe. I don't know why, because he had the same outlook and the same mannerisms, and I was like, oh, I feel like I'm talking to Pepe. I guess
Really?
childhood. I don't know why. It just did. He was same kind of inflection in his voice and spectrum. So
Yeah, he's a good guy.
very good guy.
He's a
and
good guy.
interesting guy. And many hats, well-rounded guy.
Good guy. He'll be a successful director for sure.
yeah.
For sure. But we've learned about his movie, so we've got to watch that. Irish Twins.
Yes, I'm definitely going to watch that.
I've got to watch Spirited Away.
Me too. I wrote it down. I want to watch it. Yeah, because I mean, it was kind of an interesting choice. You asked him a question
I
like
know.
that,
I know.
and you would expect one of the blockbusters, you know.
Yep. But that's he's a pretty deep guy.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I enjoy being around him very much.
Yeah, you can see why. He's an affable guy. Like I said, I would if I was still drinking. He'd be my main market. Let's have a couple of pints, pal, and a couple of squirts.
You can hang out with people without drinking with
I
them.
don't know, can you? Can I just do a bag of glue to be sociable?
Well,
I won't drink. No, I can't drink. I'll just do this.
say goodnight, Billy.
Good night, Billy.
Say goodnight, Derek.
Good night, Derek.
All right, see you next week.
All right, see you next week.
Next week's guest, actor and co-star of the TV series Call Me Kat, Kyla Pratt.